The morning my son was meant to begin a new chapter of his life, a man I barely recognized stepped into my path and quietly changed everything. I had just climbed out of my car, carefully smoothing the wrinkles from my light blue dress. At 63, I had imagined this day for years. My only son was finally getting married, and within 40 minutes I would be sitting in the front row, watching him exchange vows with the woman he loved. Before I could reach the entrance of the elegant country estate, a firm hand gently caught my arm. "Ma'am," the man said, "please don't go inside yet." I frowned, surprised more than frightened. He looked familiar, a sturdy man with silver streaks in his dark hair and a weathered gray jacket. I was certain I had seen him around my son's apartment building before, though I couldn't place his name. "I beg your pardon?" I replied, pulling my arm free. "My son is getting married. I really can't be late." "I know," he answered, glancing nervously toward the venue. "That's exactly why I need 5 minutes of your time." Every sensible thought told me to ignore him. Weddings attracted enough chaos without strangers creating more. Yet something about his expression wasn't desperate or dishonest. It was concerned. My late husband always claimed I had remarkable instincts. Whenever something felt wrong, he trusted my judgment without question. Standing in that parking lot, that familiar feeling settled heavily in my chest. I sighed. "You have 5 minutes," I said. "Tell me what's going on." "My name is Oliver," he introduced himself. "I'm a delivery driver. I've worked with this venue for years." He pointed toward a side entrance. "This morning I delivered extra flower arrangements because part of the original order was missing." I nodded impatiently. While unloading everything, I heard someone talking inside, so he hesitated. It was the bride. The words instantly tightened every muscle in my body. My future daughter-in-law, Amelia, had always been polite, thoughtful, and warm. She was 30 years old, taught first grade, and had fit into our family almost immediately. "What about her?" Oliver lowered his voice. "She thought she was alone. She was talking on the phone." My heartbeat quickened. I heard her tell someone she only needed to stay married for 2 months. I stared at him. "What?" she said. Once the marriage became legal, money would automatically transfer into her husband's account. Then she laughed and said he had absolutely no idea. For several seconds I couldn't speak. "No," I whispered. Oliver looked genuinely uncomfortable. I wish I hadn't heard it. I leaned against the nearest car to steady myself. "There must be some mistake." "I hope there is," he answered honestly. "But if someone overheard something like that before my own mother's wedding, I'd pray they'd tell her." His sincerity silenced every excuse I wanted to make. "Can you show me where this happened?" Without another word, he led me toward a narrow service hallway running alongside the estate, he behind stacks of folded linens. We could see a partially open doorway leading into the bridal suite. I waited inside. Amelia sat before a large mirror while a hairstylist pinned curls into place. She wasn't speaking on the phone anymore. Instead, she smiled calmly as if nothing in the world could trouble her. "I can't believe everything worked out exactly the way I planned," she told the stylist. The young woman laughed politely, assuming she meant the wedding decorations. But I wasn't looking at the words. I was watching Amelia's smile. It never reached her eyes. Suddenly I remembered another woman from decades earlier. Her name had been Lorraine. She had borrowed money from nearly everyone in our old neighborhood before disappearing without warning. She smiled exactly the same way. Beautiful, perfect, completely empty. A chill crept down my spine. Memory has an unusual way of recognizing danger before reason catches up. I quietly stepped back into the hallway. Oliver was watching my face. "You heard enough?" he asked softly. I looked at my watch. 45 minutes until the ceremony. My son doesn't deserve to walk blindly into something he'll regret. "What are you going to do?" I took a slow breath. My son, Adrian, inherited a trust from his father. Oliver remained silent. "The money becomes available only after he's legally married." His eyes widened. "So that's what she meant." "I don't know," I admitted. "Not yet. If I confronted Amelia without proof, she'd deny everything." Adrian adored her. He would believe her before he'd believe me. I couldn't destroy his wedding because of suspicion alone. I needed facts. Real evidence. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled until I found the number of my oldest friend, Margaret. She had spent over 20 years working as a legal assistant before retiring. If anyone knew how to uncover someone's past quickly, it was Margaret. As my finger hovered over the call button, I realized the happiest day of my son's life had already begun slipping away, and unless I discovered the truth before the ceremony started, there might be no way to stop it. Margaret answered on the second ring. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "I need your help," I interrupted, "and I need you to trust me before asking any questions." The change in my voice must have alarmed her because she immediately became serious. "What do you need?" I gave her Amelia's full name, date of birth, and the address where she had lived before moving to our city. Thankfully, I remembered those details from conversations we'd shared during the engagement. "I want you to search for anything unusual," I said. "Court records, previous engagements, lawsuits, anything that might explain what I've just heard." There was a brief pause. "I'll start immediately," Margaret replied. "Give me 15 minutes. I may not have that long. I'll call as soon as I find something." The line disconnected. I slipped my phone back into my purse and glanced toward the venue. Guests continued arriving with bright smiles, wrapped gifts, and bouquets of flowers. They had no idea that just beyond those elegant walls, everything might be falling apart. My younger sister Elaine spotted me from across the parking lot. "There you are," she called, waving excitedly. "Everyone's looking for you," I forced a smile. "I'll be inside shortly." She seemed puzzled but hurried away before asking more questions. Oliver remained beside me without speaking. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "For what?" "For bringing this to you." I shook my head. "If what you heard is true, you may have saved my son from making the biggest mistake of his life." Neither of us spoke again. Minutes crawled by. Every second felt heavier than the last. Finally, my phone vibrated. "Margaret." "I found something," she said without greeting. "What is it?" 3 years ago, Amelia was engaged to a man named Gregory Bennett. I frowned. She never mentioned another engagement. It gets worse. I held my breath. After the engagement ended, Gregory filed a civil lawsuit asking for nearly $50,000 that he claimed he'd transferred to her during their relationship. My heart sank. What happened? They settled the case privately. No criminal charges? No. Anything else? I couldn't find proof of fraud, Margaret admitted, but I found enough to notice a pattern. The engagement ended suddenly, the lawsuit disappeared after the settlement, and shortly afterward Amelia moved to another city. I closed my eyes. It wasn't proof that she planned to deceive Adrian, but it wasn't nothing either. "Can you send me everything?" "I already have." Seconds later, screenshots appeared on my phone. There it was, court records, case numbers. Dates on, nothing illegal had been proven, yet together they painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. Oliver studied my face. "Bad?" "I don't know. You do." I looked up. "You're right. The ceremony was less than 30 minutes away. There was only one person who deserved to hear this before anyone else. My son. I couldn't embarrass Amelia publicly. I wouldn't stand in the middle of the ceremony shouting objections like scenes from old movies. If I was wrong, I'd destroy 2 lives. If I was right, Adrian needed the chance to make his own decision. I walked toward the entrance. An employee greeted me with a welcoming smile. "Can I help you? I need to speak with the groom. Privately. I'm afraid he's getting ready. This cannot wait." The young employee hesitated. I lowered my voice. "It's about his future." Perhaps he heard something in my tone because he nodded and disappeared down the hallway. A minute later, another man approached. It was Caleb, Adrian's closest friend since college. He smiled politely. "Mrs. Parker, Adrian's getting dressed. Is everything all right?" "No." Concern replaced his smile. "What happened?" Instead of explaining, I unlocked my phone and handed it to him. He silently read the court documents. His expression changed almost instantly. "Where did you get this?" "I'll explain later." He looked toward the hallway leading to the groom's suite. "Does Adrian know?" "Not yet." Caleb inhaled deeply before making a decision. "Come with me." We walked quietly through the side corridor until we reached a private room. He knocked once. "It's me," he called. The door opened. There stood my son. Adrian looked exactly like his father had on our own wedding day. His charcoal suit fit perfectly. His father's gold watch rested proudly on his wrist. The excitement in his eyes made my heart ache. "Mom?" he asked with a smile. "What's wrong?" The smile faded as soon as he saw my face. Without speaking, Caleb closed the door behind us. For several seconds, the room remained completely silent. Then Adrian looked from Caleb to me. "Someone tell me what's happening." I took a slow breath, knowing the next few minutes would change both of our lives forever. Everything depended on whether my son believed what I was about to tell him. Adrian closed the door behind us and searched my face with growing concern. "Mom," he said softly, "you're scaring me. I know." I took a seat across from him, placing my purse beside my chair. My hands trembled slightly, but I refused to let emotion control the conversation. If I wanted him to believe me, I needed facts instead of fear. "I need you to listen until I've finished," I said. "After that, you can decide what you want to do." He nodded. "All right." I began with the parking lot. I told him about Oliver stopping me before I entered the venue, about the flowers he had delivered that morning, and about the conversation he accidentally overheard outside the bridal suite. Adrian's expression remained calm. Then I repeated the exact words Oliver claimed Amelia had spoken. She said she only needed to stay married for 2 months because once the marriage was official, the money would transfer automatically. His jaw tightened. "That doesn't sound like Amelia." "I hope you're right," I continued. I explained how Oliver had shown me the service hallway and how I had watched Amelia speaking while she prepared for the ceremony. I admitted that nothing she said afterward proved anything. It was simply the expression on her face that reminded me of someone from my past who had deceived many people before disappearing. Adrian leaned back in his chair. "That's only a feeling. You're right." I reached into my purse and handed him my phone, so I called Margaret. He silently opened the screenshots she had sent. His eyes moved slowly across every page. Civil lawsuit. Gregory Bennett versus Amelia Carter. Claim for repayment of transferred funds. Settlement reached. No trial. No verdict. He looked up. "She told me she'd never been engaged before." "I know." He read the documents again. "There has to be another explanation." There might be. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, I looked directly into his eyes. "You can still marry her today." His head lifted. "I'm not here to force your decision." I pushed the phone toward him. "If this is all a misunderstanding, then you'll spend the rest of your lives laughing about your overly cautious mother. And if it isn't," I swallowed, "then you'll be legally married before discovering the truth." His gaze drifted toward the window, overlooking the gardens where rows of white chairs waited beneath blooming trees. "My trust." I nodded. "Your father's trust becomes available immediately after the marriage license is filed." He lowered his eyes. "You remembered." Of course I remembered. His father had created that trust years before his illness. He believed financial security should support a lasting marriage, not encourage reckless decisions. Neither of us imagined it might someday become a reason someone would pretend to love our son. Adrian rubbed his forehead. "I love her. I know. I wanted today to be the beginning of our future." "I know." His voice cracked slightly. "I don't want to believe this. You don't have to believe me." He looked confused. "You only need to ask yourself one question." "What question?" "If someone truly loved you, would they hide something this important from you?" He stared at the phone. Minutes passed. Finally, he stood. "I need to talk to her, alone." "Yes." I rose from my chair. "No matter what happens next, this decision is yours." He nodded. "Thank you." He opened the door before stopping. "Mom?" "Yes?" "If this turns out to be nothing, I'll apologize to both of you. And if you're right?" I managed a faint smile despite the weight in my chest. "Then today will still hurt." He gave a slow nod and walked away. The hallway seemed strangely quiet as I watched him disappear toward the bridal suite. Caleb remained beside me. "You think she'll admit it?" he whispered. "I honestly don't know." We waited in silence. Every passing minute felt endless. Outside, guests continued taking their seats, unaware that the ceremony had come to a standstill before it had even begun. 10 minutes later, voices echoed faintly through the corridor. Then everything became quiet again. The bridal suite door opened. Adrian stepped into the hallway alone. His face had changed. The excitement that had filled it earlier was gone, replaced by a sadness so deep it made him look years older. He walked toward me without speaking. When he finally stopped, his eyes met mine. I asked her if there was anything she wanted to tell me before we got married. I held my breath. What did she say? He stared at the floor for a long moment before answering. She didn't deny anything. My heart sank. Instead, she looked at me and quietly said, "I think we misunderstood what this relationship was supposed to be." Those words told him everything he needed to know. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hallway that had been filled with excitement only minutes earlier now felt strangely empty. Laughter from arriving guests drifted in from the garden, completely unaware that the wedding they had come to celebrate was quietly unraveling behind closed doors. Adrian lowered himself onto a nearby chair and rested his elbows on his knees. "I kept waiting for her to explain," he said quietly. "I wanted her to tell me Oliver misunderstood. I wanted her to laugh and say someone had taken her words out of context. But she didn't," I answered gently. He slowly shook his head. When I showed her the court records, she barely looked at them. She wasn't surprised. I felt my stomach tighten. "What happened after that?" Adrian sighed deeply. "She asked if we could talk somewhere private. We stayed in the bridal suite after everyone else stepped outside." He rubbed his hands together as though trying to erase the memory. "I asked her if Gregory Bennett had really sued her." "And?" She admitted they had been engaged. "Did she explain why she lied?" She said the past didn't matter because she had moved on. His voice grew heavier. Then I asked about the money. I remained silent. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked whether I trusted her. I already knew where the conversation had gone. I told her trust depends on honesty. He looked at me. That's when she said we had different expectations from the beginning. The words struck me harder the second time. Different expectations. Not love, not commitment expectations. I asked her what she meant, Adrian continued. She smiled. He stopped speaking for several seconds. It wasn't the smile I fell in love with. A wave of sadness washed over me. It was cold. He swallowed. She said I had offered stability, security, and the kind of future she'd always wanted. I closed my eyes. Then she said she assumed I understood that relationships often begin because two people need different things. My heart ached for my son. Did she ever say she loved you? He stared silently at the floor. Not once. The answer felt heavier than anything else. Not once. Every promise, every plan, every dream they had shared suddenly seemed built on sand. "What did you do?" I asked. I told her the wedding was over. He leaned back in the chair and released a slow breath. She didn't cry. That surprised me. No. Instead, she calmly began removing the jewelry she'd planned to wear during the ceremony. She simply asked if I intended to embarrass her in front of everyone, and I told her I wouldn't. That sounded exactly like Adrian. He deserved honesty, my husband used to say whenever Adrian was a boy, even when honesty hurts. I asked Caleb to handle the guests, Adrian continued. He announced there had been an unexpected personal matter and that the ceremony wouldn't take place. Were people upset? Confused? He gave a tired smile. Some were probably disappointed about missing lunch. Despite everything, I couldn't help smiling. That small moment of humor broke the tension neither of us had realized we were carrying. What about Amelia? She left through the side entrance about 20 minutes ago. Did anyone stop her? No. He looked toward the window again. I didn't want revenge. I nodded. I only wanted the truth. Outside, vehicles slowly began leaving the estate. Guests stood in small groups asking questions no one could answer. Family members hugged one another before quietly making their way home. Months of planning had ended without a ceremony. Without music, without vows, without a marriage, Adrian stood and walked toward the window. I keep wondering whether any of it was real. I joined him. I think parts of it probably were. He looked at me. What do you mean? People are complicated. He remained silent. Someone can enjoy your kindness while still wanting something from you. I placed a hand on his shoulder. But genuine love never asks you to ignore the truth. His eyes filled with emotion. I almost lost everything today. No, I said softly. You almost did. He wrapped his arms around me. For the first time since he was a child frightened by thunderstorms, my grown son simply held on. Neither of us cared who saw. Sometimes survival deserves an embrace more than celebration ever could. As we stood together in that quiet hallway, I realized the wedding had ended before it ever began. Yet somehow, despite the heartbreak surrounding us, I knew the hardest part of the day was finally behind us. The following weeks were quieter than I expected. For the first few days, Adrian barely left his house. Friends called constantly, relatives sent messages of support, and coworkers offered sympathy, but he needed time away from everyone. The wedding that had taken months to plan had disappeared in less than an hour, leaving behind unanswered questions and memories he wasn't ready to face. I visited him every afternoon, never staying longer than he wanted. Sometimes we talked over coffee. Other times we simply sat in silence. I had learned long ago that grief doesn't always need conversation. Often it only needs company. About 2 weeks after the canceled wedding, Adrian received a phone call from an attorney. The lawyer represented Gregory Bennett, Amelia's former fiancé. After hearing through mutual acquaintances that Adrian's wedding had been called off, Gregory wanted to share his own experience. Adrian agreed to meet him. When my son returned home that evening, his expression was thoughtful rather than angry. "What did he say?" I asked. He told me almost the same story. I listened carefully. Gregory explained that during their engagement, Amelia had encouraged him to combine finances for what she called their future. Over time, he transferred thousands of dollars into accounts she controlled. Whenever he questioned the expenses, she always had a convincing explanation. By the time he realized something wasn't right, most of the money was gone. He filed a civil lawsuit hoping to recover what he had lost. Instead of fighting the case in court, Amelia agreed to a private settlement. Although he recovered part of the money, he never discovered where the rest had gone. I asked him whether she ever loved him. Adrian said quietly. "What did he say?" He smiled sadly. I already knew the answer before he spoke. He said he stopped asking himself that question years ago because it no longer mattered. Those words stayed with both of us. Not long afterward, another man contacted Adrian through his attorney. His experience was remarkably similar. There were promises of a shared future, discussions about investments, and financial decisions that benefited only one person. None of the situations resulted in criminal charges. Nothing had been proven beyond doubt. Yet the similarities were impossible to ignore. A pattern had emerged. Adrian didn't dwell on revenge. He never spoke publicly about Amelia, nor did he try to damage her reputation. He believed the truth had already protected him from making the biggest mistake of his life. Instead, he focused on rebuilding his own. Months passed. Gradually, life found its rhythm again. He returned to work, reconnected with friends, and even laughed more often than before. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but it became easier to carry. One afternoon we met for lunch at the little cafe his father had always loved. Halfway through the meal, Adrian looked at me and smiled. "Aren't you going to ask?" "Ask what?" "Whether I'll ever trust someone again." I smiled back. "I don't need to ask. Why not?" "Because I know you." He raised an eyebrow. "You still believe in people." He laughed softly. "I guess I do." His father had once told him that disappointment should never become a reason to stop believing in goodness. Wise people learn from betrayal without allowing it to define the rest of their lives. I saw that lesson shining through my son. A few days later, I finally found Oliver, the delivery driver who had stopped me in the parking lot that unforgettable morning. The venue manager gave me his number after I explained why I wanted to thank him. When he answered, he sounded almost embarrassed. "You really didn't have to call," he said. "I absolutely did. You would have figured things out eventually." "Maybe, but by then it would have been too late." There was silence for a moment. Finally, he said, "I only did what I hoped someone would do for my own family." I smiled. "Your mother must be proud of you," he chuckled. "I hope so." After we ended the call, I sat quietly on my porch, thinking about everything that had happened. That morning had begun like every mother's dream. It had nearly become every mother's nightmare. One stranger chose to speak. One friend searched for answers without hesitation. One son found the courage to face the truth instead of hiding from it. Looking back, I realized the most important decision wasn't made inside the wedding venue. It happened in the parking lot. I could have ignored Oliver. I could have smiled politely and walked away. Instead, I stopped and listened. Sometimes 5 minutes can change the direction of an entire life. If there's one lesson I carried from that extraordinary day, it's this. When your instincts urge you to pause, don't be afraid to listen. Truth often arrives quietly, and the people we love are always worth a few extra moments. Sometimes those few moments become the reason they have a better future.